5 tips for older people. The power of silence. In a world constantly screaming for attention, where everyone has an opinion, and noise fills every moment, there's one superpower that often goes unnoticed: silence. For those who have lived many years, silence is not just the absence of words, it's a conscious choice, a tool for clarity, reflection, and wisdom. When we are young, we are often eager to speak, to prove ourselves, to share our thoughts, and our voices are loud. But as we grow older, we begin to understand that sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is to remain quiet. It's in these silences that we find the space to reflect, to listen, and to really understand the world around us. Think about the elderly around you, your grandparents, maybe even an elderly neighbor. They've seen generations come and go, wars fought, and lives changed. And through it all, there's one thing that stands out: their quiet strength. It's not the loudest voice in the room that commands respect, it's the one that listens, that watches, and that understands. This story is about learning to embrace silence. Not as a retreat from life, but as a powerful tool that, when wielded wisely, can guide us through many of life's challenges. So, let's dive into some life lessons that come from knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and how we can navigate life as we grow older. Tip 1: When people underestimate you, let them. As we get older, many of us are often misunderstood. Younger people, with their fresh perspectives, may look at us and think that we are behind the times, that we don't understand modern technology or the current trends. In a way, society tends to assume that just because we've reached a certain age, our intelligence or sharpness has dulled. But, let me tell you, this could not be further from the truth. When people underestimate us, it's actually a powerful opportunity. Why? Because they reveal more about themselves than they realize. They show their impatience, their arrogance, and sometimes, their ignorance. And when they do that, we gain a clearer picture of who they truly are. There's no need to argue or correct them. By letting them believe they have the upper hand, you are giving yourself the space to observe. This is where the wisdom of silence comes in. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to correct their misconceptions. You simply sit back, watch, and listen. I remember my grandmother, a woman who had lived through countless challenges and who had always carried herself with grace, would often stay silent in the face of younger family members who would try to challenge her knowledge. Instead of arguing, she would smile, nod, and let them carry on. It wasn't out of a lack of knowledge, it was out of understanding. She knew that often, silence spoke louder than words. Later, when the right moment arrived, she would share her wisdom. And let me tell you, when she did speak, it was with such clarity that it could change the entire course of a conversation. Sometimes, wisdom lies in knowing when to remain silent. It's about letting others reveal who they truly are, so you can decide when and how to share your knowledge, or even if you should share it at all. Tip 2: When people try to argue, stay silent. Now let's talk about arguments. Anyone who has been in a heated debate knows that sometimes, it's not about finding the truth, it's about winning. Young people often argue to prove their point, but the truth is, most of the time, arguments lead nowhere. They only create frustration and tension, especially as we get older. So, is it really worth it to waste our energy on them? I've seen family gatherings turn into debates where no one listens and everyone just tries to make their point louder. But in those moments, I've learned that peace is far more valuable than being right. There's a saying that goes, "Not every battle is worth fighting," and in my experience, this couldn't be truer. My father, a man who had weathered many storms in life, would often engage in debates with younger colleagues. The more they argued, the less they listened, and the more stubborn they became. But instead of getting caught up in the back and forth, my father would remain silent. He didn't need to prove anything. He knew that true wisdom often lies in choosing peace over pride. There's no real victory in an argument, especially when no one is willing to listen. But when we choose silence, we preserve our energy and our peace. Sometimes, the greatest victory is in walking away, choosing peace over ego. The wisdom here is that not every fight is worth our energy. And sometimes, silence can be a louder statement than anything we could ever say. Tip 3. When people expect you to play naive, let them. In many families, there's this unspoken expectation that as we get older, we are responsible for supporting everyone financially. It might be paying for meals, for gifts, or even giving loans to family members. But here's the thing, your money is yours. You've worked hard for it, saved, and planned for your future, and now it's time to protect your finances. There's nothing wrong with helping out when you can, but you should never feel obligated to. The reality is, some people, family members, acquaintances, may see us as an easy source of money, especially if they assume that because we have pensions or we don't need much, we're always willing to share. But that's not the case. I've witnessed my aunt, a wise woman in her 70s, deal with this situation. One day, a distant relative reached out, asking for money. Rather than explaining herself, my aunt simply smiled and said, "I don't think I have enough to help right now." She didn't argue. She didn't try to justify her position. She knew that her finances were for her peace of mind and security, and she wasn't going to let anyone pressure her into giving. Sometimes, acting naive is the best defense. When you pretend not to know about your finances, you protect your peace without having to explain or defend yourself. It's not about being dishonest, it's about knowing that your financial security comes first, and you have the right to choose when and how to share what you have. Tip 4. When someone tries to manipulate you, act confused. Scammers and manipulators often target the elderly, believing we are more vulnerable. They assume that we're not as savvy with technology or that we are more isolated, making us easy targets for scams. But here's the secret, when you act confused, you disarm them. Manipulators thrive on speed and pressure, hoping you'll make hasty decisions without thinking them through. But when you slow down, when you act unsure, you take away their power. I've seen this happen with my own eyes. There was a time when my friend was almost tricked by a scammer posing as someone from the bank. The scammer tried to rush him into a decision, pressuring him to act fast. But his elderly neighbor, overhearing the conversation, stepped in. She acted like she didn't understand what was going on, and the scammer, growing frustrated, quickly ended the call. When you act confused or uncertain, you create hesitation. Scammers hate hesitation because it takes them off their game. They rely on quick, rash decisions, and when you refuse to engage quickly, they lose interest and move on to someone else. It's not about being confused, it's about making yourself a harder target to manipulate. Tip 5. When you just want to enjoy life, don't explain yourself. Finally, let's talk about enjoying life. As we age, we realize that we don't need to explain ourselves to anyone. Life is short, and if you want to dance, wear bright colors, or sing loudly, do it. It doesn't matter what others think. If not now, when? I remember an elderly woman in the park one day, dancing and singing to her own rhythm. She didn't care that people were staring. In fact, people were smiling and admiring her for her bravery and joy. She didn't feel the need to explain her actions to anyone. Her happiness was contagious, and it was clear to everyone that her life was full of joy, not explanations. In old age, we realize that happiness doesn't need to be validated by anyone else. You've earned the right to live your life freely, without worrying about what others think. So, go ahead, dance, sing, laugh, and love without explaining yourself. After all, if not now, then when? Conclusion: the wisdom of silence and peace. As we grow older, we learn that silence is one of the most powerful tools at our disposal. It's not about avoiding conflict, but about choosing peace. It's about knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to protect what truly matters to us. The greatest wisdom doesn't come from winning arguments or proving a point, it comes from knowing when to listen, when to step back, and when to just enjoy the simple pleasures of life. So, embrace silence, embrace your wisdom, and let go of the need to explain yourself to anyone. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who could benefit from these tips. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's create a community that values the wisdom of age. Stay wise, stay peaceful, and remember, the most important thing in life is your peace of mind.